Today I'm speaking to Dagmara and she refers to herself as an urban mobility wizard, which sounds super cool and is really cool on like a super nerdy level. And I'm not gonna lie, even though I thought I knew what it was before we started talking, I realized that I didn't. But I also realized that everybody has an invested interest in this particular topic. So it's really clear when you see the ping, ping, ping moments of me figuring this out as we're talking. Another note as well is that I kept a little bit of chit chat at the beginning of this conversation because when listening back to it, I realized that was the moment where I figured out how to articulate best what I was trying to achieve out of the podcast. And I got a bit excited. So I want to share that with you too. So enjoy this episode and we'll talk again soon. And the goal behind the actual podcast is exactly like the conversation we just had. I think there's so many conversations that I know I've had with people over the years that I wish other people were a part of or heard. This is not about like setting up a business for me. This is absolutely a pet project. This is something that I'm doing out of pure joy from those conversations that I've had with people over the years about the kind of jobs that they do, about their experience, certainly as a woman in tech fields, or their experience. There's divergence as well. All those things that I've been interested in, and cybersecurity in cases too, that I really wish I'd have heard those conversations and when I was younger, or I know there's conversations happening with people that if I was a part of it, it would bring more kind of meaning to what I do. Or, do you know, honestly, it's those moments when you hear something and you go, oh, it's not just me then. That's what I'm aiming for. And I don't care if a million people listen to it or one person listens to it. If one person walks away and says, oh, I'm so glad I heard that today, that was useful, or I don't feel alone, or I've learned this, or I reach out to Dagmara because she sounds cool and we've got a lot in common. You know, that kind of thing is what I'm actually aiming for. And yeah, that's the goal with it, which is why I want to make it kind of conversational as opposed to interviewish, because that's how it
It's
should feel.
actually super cool because there is this part of what you're describing, that there are so many conversations that are like very empowering and you can get so much from it for yourself.
Yeah.
And at the same time, when you like reach towards like more professional angle of this discussion, it's like people keep talking for the purpose of talking. And
Yes.
like we have very strong policy at work about it. And this is like one of the greatest lessons I got from traffic, that if you wouldn't say otherwise, just don't say anything.
Oh, I love that.
So it's like, please respect other people's time. And I think if we would only go for these conversations that like actually mean something, 95% of the events and the panels that are there would not happen, because it's
Yeah.
effectively just like clapping each other's on the back and saying like, oh, you're doing such a good job. No, you're doing such a good job. We are all being so amazing, but all the problems are still there.
Yeah. And that happens way too much. And I will tune out of that stuff so fast. In fact, you know, I've been on panels and talks where someone's introducing me and I'm like I'm cringing because, you know, you have to do the write up when you're speaking at things that I usually get someone else to write for me because I'm not really comfortable writing it myself. But when somebody reads that stuff out loud, it makes me laugh because that's, for me, that's not why I'm there. It's not about the me show. And I'm sure you'd feel the same way. Like, you know, every time I've ever spoken at anything, it's purely to either let people know about a particular service, group, product, way of doing things, or in most cases, even sometimes unbeknownst to me, it's for women to see other women in those positions. You know, I was talking to a lady yesterday about how I was asked on a panel once, how do you feel about being a token woman on a panel? It surely happens that you've been asked because they need to have a woman on the panel. And instinctively you want to go, well, that sucks. I want to be asked just because I deserve to be on the panel, which I do. But if I don't sit on the panel and it's full of guys, then all the other me's of 10, 20, even 5 years ago are looking at that panel going, oh, this is all about guys. It's not somewhere that I
Definitely.
belong. So that's why I sit on them. I sit on all the panels and all the places, and always unpaid as well. for that visibility. And I would have wished to have seen that back then. So it's not about blowing my trumpet. In fact, I die a death. And I'm Irish. We're not very good at taking all the compliments anyway. But it's all about the visibility and other people seeing it. My favorite thing to do right now, as well, is as more opportunities come in to speak, I like to volunteer, because I know other women now. I like to volunteer other women into it and see them. And it's like being like a proud parent to dozens and dozens of people when other people that really want to speak get the chance. But Jess, you were saying this is your first podcast, and I already love the energy, and it's early in the morning, so I'm going to be an energy, what do you call it, an energy vampire, and steal all that for my day. Thank you. My sister called it an energy viper recently, and I was like, kind of like that better than a vampire, I'm not
Works.
gonna lie. But you work in mobility as a service, right? And when I was looking at what that actually meant, because obviously there's the acronym first. When I saw mobility, I'm so ignorant. Like, first I saw it and I thought, was that like about wheelchairs? Because that's where you go to first. And then you were like, as a service. And then I went down a whole ADHD tangent and was like, digital wheelchairs? But then I actually looked through it and I could see what it is. But if you were going to explain MaaS or mobility as a service to somebody like me who knows nothing about it, where would you begin?
I'm actually very glad that you're asking that question. And I would say that MaaS is probably one of, if not the most overhyped acronym in mobility or in general, actually. And everyone has their own definition depending on what they are currently trying to sell.
Of
But
course.
effectively, MaaS is an interface that aggregates the entire mobility offer of a city into one, which removes the friction from the user to carry out the multimodal lifestyles. So it will not reverse the years of poor or negligent urban planning or urban sprawl. It does not gonna change the space allocation in the city or affect the parking policy or things like that. It also doesn't cure cancer, but it
Damn.
very easily reflects and facilitate the mobility policy that the city put in place and makes these good choices easier for people to make. So what is transformative about it? It's not the technology itself, because that's been really cool, but 5 years ago or so, something like that. But it's more about the change of the mindset, that from being a car driver or a cyclist or a public transport user, we became just a user. Because
Yeah.
it doesn't mean the fact that I have a car parked in front of my home doesn't necessarily mean that I need to reach out for the car keys every single time I'm going somewhere. Tomorrow I can go to work by bike, and on the way back I can put the bike on the train, and then I can go back home and take the car for the big groceries. Or I can even realize that, that car is there parked most of the time pretty useless. So maybe I will walk to the car sharing station instead and get rid of my own vehicle for the future. So it really is about one journey at the time. And the whole complexity and beauty at the same time of it is that it means something totally different for everyone and at every moment. So MaaS is a tool. It's not a solution, but it's a tool that allows that multimodal lifestyle to happen.
And you've always worked in mobility from what I can see. So it
Yeah.
shows like you must be passionate about it. How did you, like, I'm 45 and I'm discovering what this is now. Like, how did you find out about it to begin with?
I was lucky. I cannot explain it any other way. I mean, it's a big privilege that I've got, that I chose my career path very early on, and it just clicked, and I never changed my mind. I was shuffling a little bit between like passengers and freight and different modes and stuff like that, but it was always around that area of mobility. So yeah, it's a huge advantage that you never deviate from that path and you gather all of that experience over there, but it's a pure luck.
That's gas. Because I say in my lifetime, I find very few people that A, know what they want to do, B, find it, and C, get into it and stay in it. It's like you're a bit of a golden egg when it comes to that. And it's lovely to hear like you're excited and you're passionate about it, which is fab. Um, And when it came to getting involved in it out of curiosity, is it something that there was many women that were interested in doing, or does it lean one way or the other?
I mean, it's getting better. That's just the fact. But in the beginning, it was really very few of us. I mean, when I was doing my master in Denmark, we were 3, 4 in the entire year in the
Wow.
engineering school in the transport department. And it's not a new thing that this team departments of universities are not very largely occupied by women. Now
Yeah.
we go more towards this inclusivity, but I mean, it's enough to look around in the cities. They're not designed with women in mind because those women were never at the table when the decision was made.
And when you say that, then with it not designed with women in mind, what kind of things have you noticed that support that? I guess that show that it wasn't designed with women in mind, just that they weren't at the table, or is there particular things that you've come across when it comes to mobility and travel and infrastructure that show that it's not supported?
We can take the simplest example of the toilets, the public toilets specifically, or lack of thereof, because typically this is not an issue that men for majority of their life endure, but you know that it's like life goes in different ways. There, like you get pregnant, you get a bladder infection, or you get old and you need to pee every 5 minutes. And at some point in your life, you feel like you're on a leash. And that
Yeah.
leaves effectively the distance that is to your home toilet because there are no other solutions. So that has never been tackled because that never concerned men. The fact that the way that you carry out your trips is totally different than the typical man does. So because you do a lot of trip chaining, you go to pick up your kids and then you hit the grocery store and then you need to drop them to, I don't know, the French classes or something. None of that has ever been accommodated in the transport system because we were never then where it was designed. And that list goes on and on and on and on. Into like, it's really sad.
You can literally see the cogs turning in my head, and I'm like, oh my God. Because even with the toilet one, I remember I've been pregnant 3 times. And I remember in all 3 cases, certainly in the last trimester, I would map my entire day if I was leaving the house around where I knew I could use a toilet, whether it was in a coffee shop or restaurant. There's not a lot of public toilets where I am at as a general rule. And those that are often out of order or really badly maintained, or may well have somebody asleep in a corner of one of them, so you don't want to be going in when you're alone. But on my third pregnancy, I discovered an app which wasn't really useful. I live in the southeast of Ireland, in Wexford. It wasn't really useful outside of cities, but I remember thinking that was really smart. And it was a toilet app where you could literally go on and see where the nearest available bathrooms were, including ones that were in stores, and not just coffee shops and stuff, but stores that would allow you to use their bathrooms. And I
Did it
live
have
by it.
ratings?
Sorry?
Did it have ratings or like, the experience type of
Oh my God. No, not at
would be
that
really
time.
good. I mean, you said yourself you've been pregnant. I've been pregnant not such a long time ago, and I remember going to a public toilet was a hell of an adventure because you never know if you're actually gonna pee or throw up or you're just gonna pass out because of the smell.
It's so true. Like, yeah, you'd like to know. I have seen, like, there's a lady on TikTok that does toilet ratings. Like, she's made a whole kind of, it's a bit funny. Like, she began going into some of the most unusual bathrooms kind of around Europe, really. And then around the world. And now she goes into like bougie department store toilets, that like for designer stores and stuff. And she talks about the quality of the paper that you dry your hands with and everything. And weirdly enough, I often find myself in a trance of watching all of those videos one after the other, because whilst it seems a little bit daft, and I imagine most blokes in the world will scroll past that kind of thing, it's exactly the kind of material that interested me at a level it probably shouldn't have. But I I don't have anything against public toilets. I love using them in other countries. We're really bad at it in Ireland, really, really bad at it, at maintaining them. But I would like to know in advance what I'm going to be up against, because then I can determine how badly I need to use it. Do I really need to use it on the kind of level where I need to walk in on my tiptoes and hover, like, or, or will I wait for another few minutes till I can find another one? Like, how bad is the situation? But there's
I
nothing
think
worse than discovering when you're in there how bad it is.
this has never been a problem of a man. They just go in the bushes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how easy is that? There isn't any bum shaped bushes that I can go in without getting arrested anyway. So that's one of the challenges, I guess. And when it comes to bigger cities, then what else would be a challenge when it comes to finding those kind of mobility solutions?
I think to a large extent, there is a lack of skills in the city administration itself. I mean, it's not a secret that all modern mobility solutions, they require a specific set of very narrow and expensive skills to have. So that is one thing. But at the same time, all of these solutions are still largely available pretty much off shelf. But there is, at a lot of cases, there are issues. The procurement process that is put in place, especially for public procurement, is very burdensome, and it kind of restrains that innovation to happen. So these are like two angles to tackle, and the most important ones I would still say is the narrow political vision of or
Yeah,
lack of thereof, because from my experience, if the willingness is there, sky is the limit. I mean, we can achieve everything. If there is no data, we're gonna build the data. If like something's missing, we're gonna find out the way to get it. But if there is no actual commitment, you can bring up the whole catalog of all this fancy EV, AV, DRT, whatever acronyms you want. This is not gonna change anything.
true. And I've seen, like, even this week I was reading a couple of articles that show like the polar opposites of the approach. And not to diss Ireland, I love it. You know, it's great. But we do get tied up a lot in that political bullshit, really, where we've been threatening to put in place a metro system for, oh, I don't know, it's got to be at 10, 20 years. And we've already pumped millions into it and still haven't actually turned turf, as we call it. We still haven't actually begun the project. And then you look at places like, I can't remember where, it was one of the Nordic countries that I was reading an article on recently that's creating a road that when you drive on it, it can charge your electric vehicle. I'm like, we're nearly at the horse and cart stage and they're charging their vehicles while they drive. Like, it's such a
Well, I
difference.
would still say that the investment in the metro is way more meaningful than another infrastructure for the EV, because it's not the engine that is an issue; it's an actual vehicle. So I would
True.
still clap on the island for that.
Okay, we'll take that. We'll take that and we'll run with it. Um, and then you are spend time then analyzing the trends around. Is it around how people use the infrastructure, or what exactly is involved in what you're doing? Your part of it.
I would say it's very holistic, because it's like, to have an accurate view, you need to have different pieces and put different puzzles together. So you need to first, and actually this is probably the most important piece of it, that you need to use it yourself to understand how the things work, because it's very easy to make the decision from behind of your fancy desk without ever hopping on a bike and lecturing people like, go, go, go. Like this, that's, if you don't understand what it means, you're never gonna build a policy that actually makes sense.
True, true. Experience it first, yeah.
It requires a lot of collection of a lot of data point to have comparison, because there is no one unique solution, like one fits it all type of setup. It's always very contextualized. You need to understand a lot of different angle. Culture dimension is very important. So gathering all of this information together, seeing in which direction specific action turns the policy going, is actually very helpful, not only for myself, but also for the cities that I'm working with, so that they can get some benchmark and inspiration. And in many cases, I found mistakes that were already done by someone else.
And when you gather that data, do you combine like all of the usage and kind of statistical data that's machine collected as such with things like human, like questionnaire data about from the humans about how they use it, or do we look exclusively at the I guess the usage data that's collected by those machines?
Numbers are very important. I love
Yeah.
numbers. I am engineer, like totally. That's usually very representative. But I think if we take out the human dimension of it, it's very hard to miss important bits and pieces of that. And combining both is probably the way to go.
Yeah, would make sense. Like, what kind of trends have you seen over the last few years, or at least between when you got involved and now? What way have you seen things change?
The most amazing one is that we finally start understanding that these are people that live in the cities and not cars. So that is like
Imagine that.
very promising for the future. It hasn't been given from the beginning. And by that, I mean, the extension of that is also that we start to appreciate more walking and cycling and all of this soft transport modes. The policy dimension is being more courageous, although it still receives a lot of pressure. I think it's universal all over Europe, probably all over the world, that these courageous, bold decisions are not very popular in a lot of places, but they are still happening, which proves that it is important to do it. We see the fact that the intake of driving license in the younger generation is becoming less and less. There is less
Oh,
interest in
interesting.
the company cars also. There is more demand, or at least the clear willingness of having something more than just the regular company car or like public transport membership and stuff like that from people that are commuting to work. So there is a great momentum. To a large extent, we owe it to COVID and how everything has changed and how we start to play a little bit more between supply and demand. And it looks really exciting for the next years to come.
I like that. It sounds like people are more aware. I think there's a couple of things you mentioned in that there that have me thinking. So COVID for starters, I think we were all traumatized to some level about it, but we're 5 years away from when that started now. And I think we're able to look back objectively somewhat and see that there were some massive benefits, like people working from home. I know Leanne Maskell from ADHD Works was talking about how more people have been diagnosed with ADHD since the return to work, and that's because they've discovered how much more effectively they can work. Sorry, that's likely because they've discovered how much more effectively they can work when they work from home because they've got the things they need to support the way that they need to work. And then um you've got other benefits of COVID, like you say, taking all of the traffic off the roads, and realizing, like, we even found that our public transport cost less when we came back because they were trying to encourage people to use it. And then when students went back, they did better jobs with regards to student schemes and costing for buses, and made things like uh, younger people more expensive on cars to deter them from driving. Because in Ireland, you could be driving 2 or 3 counties to go to college. But lots of different changes like that we've seen. But then in the technology side, then too, people can study remotely if they want to. But one thing that you mentioned there that seems really comes out of your mouth really naturally is the choice to, like, walk, cycle, drive, which I know they're very different countries. And one of the things we find, like in Ireland, once you've got a car, you suddenly become kind of chained to that car everywhere. You go to school, you go to the shops, you drive 2 minutes down the road to go somewhere rather than walk. It's like people don't think, maybe I should walk and do this instead. And I think some of it falls down to, like, our our infrastructure for commuting in cities like Cork and Dublin and Belfast and Galway um, is in the cities. But for anyone that's in the neighbouring counties, it's a lot harder to get there. It's getting better. It's getting a whole lot better. Um, but that I like that. I like that mindset where you're automatically thinking, what's the purpose for this? And then the last thing that you were talking about there reminded me that I think the next generation, I'm at that stage now where I get to say things like that, are approaching the whole world differently. Like, we've given them a bit of a mess when it comes to what we've done to the environment. We've given, when I say we, I don't mean you and me, we, because you're a lot younger than I am. I mean we in my generation. We've given them an almost impossible market when it comes to purchasing their own homes. We've made it, we're in the workplace, that the bar for getting into roles and stuff, it's a lot harder to do it. And the place that they appear to have the most control is over those kind of decisions that they make about how they treat their environment, how they consume their goods, who they choose to back, whether it's politically or financially or economically. And that, you talked about the trend changing there. And I think it warms my heart to see people moving towards doing what they feel is right, because that's where they have the power now, rather than just falling into line with everybody else and not giving a damn about the impact it's going to have on whether it's the environment or the culture or the economics of a company from there. Rant over.
I love it. I love it. I think it's really sad when you see these people that would just hop on their car to do like 2 minutes trip to the supermarket. I mean, how bad the environment is if you don't
Yeah.
want to walk for 2 minutes. This is it's so pleasant. Okay, I get it if it's minus 40 degrees and like, or it rains, but come on, I mean, it rains all the time in Brussels and we still do that. Like it's nice to be outside, like you can see your neighbors, and effectively that also means that if it's so easy to take the car for the 2 minutes, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, you're
Like
right.
this is again, this is the effect of the policies in Brussels specifically, and I'm gonna talk probably a lot about Brussels because like this is the most of my adult life is. And there are so many cars, company cars mostly, and it's very controversial and unpopular opinion to say, but that means they're too cheap. And
Yeah,
it's not only about the monetary value of it, but about everything that comes around it. I mean, it comes at the expense of someone else.
true, true. I hadn't even thought about that because they're not cheap over here.
Yeah,
We
but
don't.
it's just about the number. It's not that just the price tag, but if it's so easy to get everywhere, that is a cost that someone else is paying.
Mm,
I mean, if it's so easy to cut the neighborhood to take this 2 minute trip to the store and it's faster to drive than walk, that means that my kids cannot play on that street. Or
true.
like there is no park in which the dogs can play or the elderly can go and enjoy their afternoon. Like it's there is one cake, and the way we're going to cut it, like this is how we're gonna distribute the space in the society. If we're giving 90% of it to the cars, that means that everyone else is kind of screwed.
That that true. That's a very fair point. There's no arguing with that. I was just thinking about we were away with work in Texas at the beginning of the year, and I remember being absolutely fascinated by how they had lots of not multi-story car parks, just outdoor car parks, and they were like 10 times bigger than the buildings they're beside. And firstly, I was fascinated going, they have all this space. Like, there's so much space here. But also, when you're saying that, I realized that I don't recall seeing one park or one green area or one place where people could walk around. And it's not walking in many of the states is not something that you typically do. I remember going to Maryland to our main offices, and I walked for 20 minutes to go meet somebody in a bar, and I was like, where are the footpaths? And I walked in the grass in some cases. And when I got there, he was like, you walked?
You
Why did you
what?
walk? Like, and I realized the whole place is not built for that, like because they don't have footpaths, and apparently they've also got snakes. And I was walking through the grass, and I didn't know, so I didn't want to walk again. But that's a
Well,
whole
they
other
walk
story.
to these giant parking lots. That's their daily exercise, I guess. If given the size, they can probably hit this 10K.
Yeah, true. That's fair. They do say if you try to improve your steps, park as far away from the door of the supermarket, which always makes me laugh when I see that. Like, or walk. um, when you work, then obviously making improvements to these kind of things, any of those mobility solutions involves having the public side of things and the private side of things working together to do a good job of it, because you're going to have, you know, funding and innovation and those two things combined. Have you seen examples yourself firsthand of where you've seen really successful collaborations between two of those?
But I think these examples are all over the place. We just never pay attention to them.
Yeah.
It's effectively very limited amount of projects that a public administration is carrying out entirely by themselves. It's usually combined with the expertise from some private sector players, bigger or smaller, like, I don't know, ticketing, for instance.
Yeah.
You hardly imagine a big city that is running their own ticketing system by themselves, hardware and software included.
True.
So, and I think MaaS is actually a great example of how public and private partnership can go together, because in a lot of cases, it's very complex. I mean, delivering innovation is very complex. Receiving innovation is complex as well. And that the knowledge of how to drive that complexity usually lies within the industry, and the gap of understanding how does it work is just enormous. Like what public administration sees versus how uh, private sector works. These are just two opposite sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And as long as both sides of that spectrum will not show compassion and understanding for it, for that gap itself, we're not going to get very far. But we see, fortunately, a lot of places in which this is working well. We have Berlin. I think it's an amazing example that was at the very, very forefront of when we started to do that, and when MaaS started to become something actually more than just a hype word. Brussels also, it's an amazing, fantastic example, and actually Brussels shows that if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm being here for 10 years now, and the difference between what I found when I arrived versus now is these are two different cities.
Oh,
Effect.
really?
And that happened a lot because of the technological innovation, but also very courageous political leadership.
Mm.
So these two always have to go together. And seriously, if we could have done that, anyone can. I mean, I'm taking no excuses.
Yeah. I love that. I love how excited you get when you talk about it as well. Um, which I don't know. I like to see people thrive in things that they want to do and that they enjoy doing. And I think it's really important for other people to see people be excited about what it is that they do. I grew up living in fear that that the job I would do would be the job that I do for the rest of my life, because that's just the mentality, I guess, when I was little, that you were looking for a job and it was to be for life. But now I want my kids to see like that it's possible to do something that you actually enjoy, and guess what? Get paid for it. So I was talking to my son recently, and actually, before I tell you that, what exactly did you study in college? Which kind of engineering? Because I'm learning there's different flavors.
Transportation and logistics.
Ah, because I was talking to my son recently, and he was saying, "Okay, mom, I think that I have four boys, by the way. So it's one of them. He's nearly 18. He's doing his exams this year, and he was saying, think about what I want to do in college. I might do architecture or psychology, or I'm trying to think what I can do that I'd get paid well at." And I'm like, well, that's good if you know what you want to do with all the money you're going to get paid well at, because you need to do something that's going to feed your soul, or you're just going to die doing that job out of boredom. It doesn't matter if the job is fascinating and interesting and intelligent. If you don't want to do it, you're just doing it for the money, that's not going to last very well. And I said to him, like, you've always talked about like in maths and engineering, why have you changed your mind? And he's like, well, I'm trying to figure out where I can make the most money. And like engineering's good. I'm not asking you that. But
No, in transport is charity. Don't send him that
really?
way.
Maybe it's just in tech engineering then. But he said, I know, he said, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to make that, like, because it was going to be less than what he was looking at. And he says, I'm not really sure. And I said, well, look, what about if you could work in, any kind of engineering? Have you thought about all the different flavors, of which I thought there was maybe three, but now I've learned there's like dozens and dozens of different kinds. And he was working through those. And I sort of leaned the argument towards, I said, well, what about bridges? And you could see him going, well, bridges, mum. I was reading about this and I was looking at that. Like, it's unreal. He absolutely lights up when you talk about bridges and the construction of bridges and what's used and all the physics behind it and all the different countries, all the different bridges are in and how they work. Now, for me, I'm just like, ooh, over the head. It means absolutely nothing. But I was like, do you realize that you know what it is that you want to do? And he was looking at me really blankly. Like, it's like, work in bridges. I don't know what you got to do to work with bridges, but work in that. So I've been learning recently, which is why I was asking you what kind of engineering you did. Been learning recently about how many different kinds of engineering there are, and
Yeah.
he's choosing a course that it's in Ireland, but it's also in Scotland. He's thinking about Scotland, and it's like, is it aeronautical engineering? And I was looking at him going,
It's
isn't
civil
that isn't
engineering.
that
No?
planes? Like, he said, yeah. He said, but mom, if you look at the course, it's planes and long span bridges. So I don't want to work with no little bridges. He says, I want to work with the big ones. So for me, hence asking the question, I would never have gone to, like, you can do mechanical engineering and civil engineering around like designing and building. But he wants to be, I can't remember exactly, some not necessarily involved in the construction, like the oversight and maintenance and fixing of some of these things. And he also is interested in the planes and the mechanics side of it. But he sat me down then and he lectured me on how short-sighted I was in assuming that aeronautical engineering was just about airplanes, which has, every time now I talk to somebody that does engineering, I'm like, what flavor did you do? To see, does it match the actual end career? Because often it doesn't. And, I've met women that have done mechanical engineering and then masters in civil engineering, or have done civil engineering and then a master's in like aeronautical or something. Like, they've mixed all of the flavors around to go do things, and some of them have worked in like space, not in space, but in space aeronautics. You can clearly see it's not my field. So the way that they've
Plain
mixed
stuff.
But I do know that at the root of it all, like my lads all love math, physics, applied maths, anything science based, all of that side of stuff, which ironically I have never been great at, but it's something they love. Their dad would love it as well. So it makes perfect sense to do things like that. But yeah, this week I've been having my mind blown by all of the different kinds of engineering there is. So it's good to know that your one makes sense then. It matches the role. Whew.
I'm glad I'm making it easier, but I also actually know someone that did the PhD about bridges, so I will be happy
Oh,
to put
really?
in touch with him. And he's also super passionate about the bridge that he built, so
It's
I can
unreal.
see the naked vibe.
Yeah, when people like bridges, they like bridges. Like there was a girl I used to work with that also loves bridges, and when I mentioned it to her, she did exactly the same as him. Like she sat up in her seat and she's like, "Oh my god, did you see this?" And it was at the time I think there was a bridge in Maryland that a boat went into and it collapsed. That happened a couple of months ago, and she now sends me pictures of bridges all the time to send to my to my son. Especially if she's on a plane and she's flying over them, she sends pictures. So it's like this little hidden community that when you mention the word, you see them all just kind of glow. And I had no idea. I think bridges are cool. I love them, and I love to watch documentaries on how they're made. But I hadn't, again, because it wasn't something that I'm in. I hadn't thought about the people behind it who create it and come up with all those ideas. And now that I know more than I might necessarily want to know about it, it just blows my mind what's involved in it, how many people, and yeah, fascinating stuff. So
Gonna live with it, I guess. You will never see the bridge the same way again.
not
And it's
even
kind
sort
of,
of.
how people are saying that find what you love, and you're never gonna be actually working.
Yes.
This is such a myth. It's actually the opposite. Find what you love, and you're gonna be working all the time.
True, sure,
Because
you won't turn it off,
whenever
will
you
you?
go, you see the entire world through the lenses of what you're doing. So it's like, you cannot just go for holidays and say like, oh wow, this is a nice beach. Like, oh, very cute pedestrian area, like the low emission zone, 30 kilometers per hour, nice bike sharing scheme. Like, it's like a disability.
I love that though. At least you're absorbing it everywhere. And I guess that's how innovative and new and exciting things come to countries that don't already have it, because you'll have seen it somewhere else or experienced it somewhere else or figured out what works or what doesn't. Isn't it the same like if you if you like to cook, or you are a chef, or are dating a chef, that you suddenly start to look at food a different way. Or I remember doing media production and advertising many many moons ago back in college, and I could never listen to an advert, whether it was on radio or on the TV, in the same way again. The whole time I was analyzing the words that they use, the tone that they use, like even the fact that it's slightly louder than the TV show, and all of the colors that they use. And it ruined the joy of innate adverts where you go oh through the breaks back in the old days when you couldn't watch TV on demand. But yeah, exactly what you're saying. So it means that because of your love of it, you're taking that stuff home then, and integrating it into what you do, which can only make things better. More experience, more exposure in any field, but especially in the field that you're in. Then is there, since you've mentioned that then and you've traveled a bit, is there any cities that you have spotted where you go, yeah, they've got it all figured out, like that you are really on top of the game?
I would say definitely Copenhagen, but I might be biased here since I did my master there. But it just like the entire city is really designed not about vehicle, it's designed about people. And it's like, I think a lot of people are getting that misconception that Copenhagen is for bikes, which is fairly justified if you think about it. But it's actually much more than that. This is like a very human friendly city, and partially that's because it's friendly to bikes and the infrastructure. And actually that makes me think also that it's kind of funny that the e-scooters, the Lime and other type of things, this is actually probably the greatest advancement that we did in
Yeah.
terms of like allocation of urban space. And although they got so much hit about how not inclusive they were, and how many troubles they caused and stuff like that,
Yeah.
they never created a problem. They exposed a problem that just took keep a link of what I want to, what was I talking about? The Copenhagen, they cracked it before. They showed like how not friendly urban infrastructure is to
Yeah.
everyone else than cars. And this is what you don't have there. Since the car is friendly to the city is friendly to small wheels, it means that it's friendly to everyone.
Yeah.
It's friendly to a mother with the baby stroller. It's friendly to the grandma with this like grocery cart, to people on wheelchairs and stuff like that. So Copenhagen always and forever. It's an amazing place to be. The Dutch cities are also really awesome, and probably I would like, not Amsterdam. Amsterdam is nice, but it's just nice. But for instance, Utrecht or The Hague,
Yeah.
seriously, very lovely. If you've never been, you should definitely
I'm
go.
going to The Hague in 2 weeks, which is why I was like, yeah, really?
You're gonna love it. It's fantastic, and they have all of these like super seemingly small solutions in place that for them is just like the reality as they live, and for everyone else they are just mind blown. Like for instance, in Eindhoven, you know that you can rent a baby stroller in if you can by bike. There is this
No.
bike parking that you can come in. You put your kid in the cargo bike or in that seat that you install on it, and you can get there, park your bike, and take the stroller.
No way. I mean,
You
it
know,
makes
it's so
perfect
simple.
sense, but
It's so simple, and for them, it's just like, of course you can. But for everyone, it's like,
yeah. I mean, when you say things like that, I go, of course, like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. We should absolutely have those things. Like in the town that I'm in, and we've only recently, maybe in the last year, we introduced like the electric bikes that you can just rent on spec as such as once you leave them back in their little area. And then I noticed in the last month they've introduced the scooters as well. And I was kind of going, people are going to wreck that. It's different in the cities. There's lots of people around. They're going to see it, but they haven't. They've respected it and they've used it well, especially younger people, because cars and insurance and all that is much more expensive. So it's nice to see them using it. And I've seen more older people embrace it now that the younger people are doing it. But like you say, what I've also seen, so the town that I'm in is a Viking town, is what it's well known as. So it's got loads of teeny little windy roads and little tiny footpaths and stuff that for years people with disabilities and that need to use a wheelchair or crutches or one of those like push sort of like Zimmer frames with the wheels on it, um, have been complaining that it's not very accessible. And now all of a sudden we've seen bike paths pop up because of the popularity of these bikes and scooters, and they have to address the inability for people to get around. And they've restructured a lot of the town around the usage of the bikes and scooters, which, like you say, has made it a lot more friendly for people with strollers. Like for about 2 or 3 years, I had one of those double strollers, the side by side ones. Well, what a mistake that was. If I ever
my
needed to use
hero, dog.
it. Yeah, true, true. I mean, it was great and it was comfortable for the kids and I could see everything well, but I couldn't get into many doors of many of the stores, and there wasn't like ramps on the curbs. There definitely wasn't a wide enough path in many places to go with them. I ended up switching to like a front and back kind of one instead. But now there is, simply because of the launch of the EV bikes. Like, so yeah, the knock on effect is really, really great to see. And the EV bikes as well will they'll bring people who don't normally cycle out of the woodwork, because you've got the support of that little boost of it. Like they have the little motors in it. I have an EV bike here at home and I'd never use it, only for the fact that it has the motor support if I need it then as well, rather than it just being me pedaling, because yeah, it's not my
But
forte.
see, it really is about trying. So like,
Yeah.
if once you try and once it's made it easy for you to try, then you're way more likely to actually start making different trips with different transport modes. And the fact that what you were saying about like this big double baby stroller, this is actually seriously mind blowing how differently you see your city, the city in which you lived your entire life, once you get something to push in front of you.
Yes.
And I
Absolutely.
always consider myself very vigilant and very attentive to how the infrastructure is built and all that. Actually not. Like I now I see a totally whole new dimension of how badly roads are made, the culture of driving is like, just for 5 minutes, I'm gonna park here and block that entire sidewalk. You
No.
can wait, right? I mean, like, where are you rushing? You already have a baby. So,
True. Yeah.
and
Even on my street, that
I
happens. Like,
swear,
yeah.
if there was one mother that would be put next to these guys that were designing that infrastructure, she would lecture them clear and loud of like how many bad ideas they have. Just no one never listened because like we never try. And as long as you don't try, you don't actually understand.
Yeah. And that's why we need more women involved and more people from all these different diverse backgrounds, because exactly that. It's not just the cities aren't only being used by middle-aged white men or younger white men, capable ones, whichever. They're being used by everybody, funnily enough. And you're absolutely right. In the same way that people would say, like, when you're pregnant, it feels like everybody else is pregnant. Where were you all hiding? But we're all pregnant at the
I
same
think
time.
it's really like
Yeah.
that.
Because your whole world is centered around that, and that's what you're focusing on. The same way, like, I remember the first time leaving my house with a buggy and feeling really, really awkward and uncomfortable because I hadn't, well, I'd pushed a buggy before. I have younger siblings, like, but I'd never just pushed a buggy with my baby in it. When you do, you become much more self-conscious about how close you are to things, because I'm like, I grew this took me like the best part of a year to grow. Get
I
away
made
from
it.
it. Yeah. I'm not going to bump on the curb. I'm not going to step out into the road. But even when footpaths are so narrow that when you're trying to cross the road and you're waiting, even if it's at a not pedestrian cross, yeah, pedestrian cross, with the actual green man, that you have to stand beside your buggy while you do it. I've often seen people forced to they'll put the buggy out
One of
off
them.
the curb, and I'm like, that's like say, I made that from scratch. Get it back in, please. But there's not enough room to stand properly with a buggy while you're waiting to cross the road because the path is too narrow. Even that is a safety hazard of its own. And then add into it that maybe you've got a toddler or a small child whose hand you're holding as well, or they're on one of those little like paddles that are on the back of it that maybe they're sitting on. You can get these kind of clip-on adjustments and stuff too. You need even more space. I've seen a lady once used to go out running and she was pushing one of those double side-by-side buggies, and it had a little kind of a tail at the back of it. It's kind of like a bike where there's a bike seat and a wheel, and her older kid was on that, about 3, I think. And she was running, but she picked a buggy because I was looking at it going, it has just the one handle. I remember I did go through a phase of running with one of them as well. And I had a buggy with 2 handles, and then the buggy goes sideways. But in her case, excuse my coughing. In her case, like, she needed space. She didn't need any more space than a bicycle took up, but she needed space to be able to get to the
Look,
place where she wanted to run. There was loads of space there, but to get there, and the only way for her to get there safely was actually to drive her car with all of this stuff in it, and then pull up somewhere where there was enough space for her to get her buggy out and her kid out and run and do the things that she wanted to do all in the one place together, because it wasn't safe to do that around town because of the lack of space. So I'm not going to look at the world right after this. You know this. I'm going to leave my house and I'm going to judge all over every corner and every inch of it and go, we can do better. We can, like, but I didn't, as you're talking, I didn't realize all
but
the
it is
things.
very important that we all see it because it's not that people are not aware of, like, I mean, maybe not even that they're not aware. People typically are not evil. Like, they
Yeah.
really don't consciously try to make other people miserable. They just don't realize, like, what impact their action have. And for instance, very close to where I live, there is an intersection. There is a tram track, like buses coming through. It's very narrow. As you said, that space when you wait for the light to turn green is like very, very narrow. And there is a big advanced stop line in front of the traffic light, so that first the buses, when they turn, they have the room to actually maneuver and they can
Yeah.
fit the narrow road. The bicycle can go up in front of the traffic, and the pedestrians that are like waiting for the green light, they have like at least some space to breathe. But very often you see that the cars just ignore that advanced stoplight. They go all the way in. Then there is a bus trying to turn. It doesn't have the space. So the car needs to go on that super narrow already pedestrian space in which like they pretty much drive over your feet.
Yeah.
But that's I really want to believe it's not because they think that they are so important and they need to really go as close to the light as possible. It's just that they don't know.
Yeah.
And like more we're gonna talk about it, more we're gonna finger point that like, come on, we can do this better. Like maybe it used to work 10 years ago, but it doesn't work now. Then like we're gonna achieve something, but we need to start finger pointing and we need to start being vocal about it, because otherwise no one will care.
It'll be interesting. It would be interesting to introduce like almost a class on that in school. Like we talk about how by the time you leave school, we can't do things like understand our electricity bills or what all the taxes are that we're paying on our payslip. So we should teach that. I mean, we do like this fourth year in secondary schools here, which used to be optional. It's becoming more mandatory where there's more kind of life skills taught and less academic for a while, and then they go into senior cycle. But things like that, send them out on the bikes, on the scooters, give them buggies like in the States where they give them the fake baby to take home. You know, give them these things so that they can look at the world that way. Because you only need to take one walk down your main street to see how child friendly it is or it isn't. I say main street because in Ireland we still have all of our towns are centered around a main street as opposed to malls and stuff. You only need to take one walk with that buggy or one cycle into the town to see how close buses drive to you, or you know, to do those things and see it from a different perspective. And I think if we put that kind of stuff into schools, they're the next generation of people going into employment. And I feel like we all learn these lessons way too late when we actually have babies and when we actually need wheelchairs or have elderly parents that you need, you know, the bigger space to get them in and out of cars and stuff. If we done a trial run of this at 15 years of age in school, when you know, when they're old enough that you can kind of set them the task to go do it as opposed to have to stay with them, then I think we'd fix these things earlier. I spent a lot of time on my pedestal today, aren't I? Fix this, fix that.
I'm glad I'm not alone, actually. And yeah, it's also when you still have the energy and time and
Yeah.
willingness to achieve the change, because like when you already when you broken your leg and you already barely walk, like you're so frustrated, you're tired, like you cannot go anywhere, you're super dependent. Seriously, it's very few people that would still find the courage and start writing letters to the city hall that this intersection here is totally messed up. Like, no, it like it really when it happens, it's already too late. So
Yeah.
it's like we need to be a little bit more proactive and seize that energy that the youth has, and the fact that they do see places differently. They
Yeah.
have different experience with spaces. They travel way more than us already when they're young. So they have the comparison. They see how things can be running better. Like, let's listen to them. They
Yeah.
like, let's give them the voice and let's listen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like mine will catch buses and trains and such all the time. And I used to commute to Dublin, so it was a 2 hour drive. But I didn't do it as much, but it's only listening to them. Like they'll know which buses have the charge ports for their phones, and they'll actually actively choose the bus that will have charge ports and pay even slightly more to get on that one because that's what's important to them if they have to be on it for more than 15 minutes, God love them, without a charger. Or, you know, they'll know which ones are more reliable for time. They'll know which spot is the best spot to stand in at the bus stop to make sure you don't get caught in the rain because, you know, they're not going to cover everyone. And they're all little things, but they're little things I don't have to think about anymore because I don't catch buses if I'm going up to Dublin because of the times that I have to go at. We don't have many. They get them down to the next town. But they do. And then the more they talk about it, the more I'm kind of going, geez, it hasn't changed since I was a teenager. Like the bus stops are still those half shelters that will shelter 3 people, and then the other 30 people have to stand in the rain. And yeah, the even like we have like 2 lanes where the buses come into our town, so everyone parks where the bus is supposed to be, and then there's chaos and the bus is out into the
5 minutes, no biggie.
and I wouldn't mind. There's nothing there significant. It's not like it's got like any service on that street that people absolutely need to use. There's a little newsagents, that's it. And there's dozens of them all over the town. Go to a different one.
I mean, as long as there is no McDonald's with drive-through, I don't see like it's actually it's a very common discussion, you know, when you talk about introducing the pedestrian zones or like reducing the traffic or whatever. Those business owners would always come lashing at you that like you're gonna kill my business, like people will stop coming. Like are you actually running a drive-through? Because like that's pretty much the only case in which I see the car being a customer of something, and other than that, it's actually people doing purchases and using the services.
Yeah.
There is tons of scientific evidence that supports that, but I mean, we always loop in the same circles.
Yes. And then businesses these days, if you're still managing to keep working after COVID, when people physically weren't allowed into your business, then you've managed to be chameleon like and keep up to date with the needs of your actual consumers. And I think, some businesses, the ones where you have to go in to eat food and you have to go in to have drinks and stuff, aside from those, all other businesses have figured out how to adapt, and that's key, isn't it, to keeping a business running, I would have thought. So I want to talk to you more, but I'm running out of time. But what I do want to ask before we finish up is that with regards that future of urban mobility, what kind of things do you see, or what are you most excited about seeing happen for in the future?
I'm gonna be a bummer,
Oh no.
and I know that there's a lot of hype about, autonomous vehicles and DRT and a lot of like cool technologies coming in, and I get it. It is very exciting, but I am a very firm believer of making walking and cycling great again and keeping it simple. This is, I think, the greatest innovation that we can hope for, to like go back to square one and figure it out like well for these ones. I think that cities that are designed for people will be designed to accommodate any technology to come. And the other way around, like we can bring any sort of technology as we wish. If there is no infrastructure, if there's no legislation, if there's no framework to actually utilize it well, we're gonna keep spinning in circles and achieving nothing.
Yeah.
So as much as I support all the investment, innovation, everything possible, like let's keep putting people at the center of it, not the technology, not the vehicles, not anything else, just the people. But from the purely technological perspective, if there is something that excites me a lot, is targeted, very granular micro subsidies for transport. So a system that allows nudging in a very personalized way, which is currently probably not yet possible. We are getting there, but not there yet. But that I think is going to be a real game changer.
Cool. Sounds really interesting. And you know what? I wasn't a bummer at all, because I think encouraging the walking and physically getting out there, one of the biggest benefits I think we all learned, again, back during COVID. Remember when we were limited to staying within your 5K and you'd go out for a walk, and when you're passing somebody in the street in the very early stages, you might pass them wide to make sure you kept your 6 foot. But the things that gave me the most joy during that time was literally somebody smiling, saying, "Hi, how are you?" And that human interaction, like, we get less and less of it because of just how we work and how we do things. And there's lots of times where I quite enjoy not having to interact with people, don't get me wrong. But there are times as well, if I'm out walking the dog and I'm in a world of my own and somebody simply smiles and says hello, and that, on a human level, that still needs to happen. And you need to make those connections with people. And I have people that know my dog's name before knowing my name now, because they recognize him from out on walks. But
I feel you. I'm in the same position.
But you need to have human interaction. That's where everything is grown from, and that's where everything gets better. So if getting people out and looking after themselves and getting a bit of fresh air and daylight and saying hello to human beings, if that's the worst case scenario, then I'm here for it. I think that's a big win.
Sounds really good. And actually, that makes me think, when I was a kid, my great grandfather moved to the city where I was living, and he spent his entire life in a very tiny, super isolated village. And then when he moved to us, he had to learn how to use buses. And he was in his 90s, but he was very independent. And I remember that one time I was coming back from school and I entered the bus, and he was there, like chatting with a lot of random strangers around him, and that at that time I remember that it really got me being like, wow, for him it's really like a new dimension of social contact that he
Yeah.
has, because as you're saying, it's so important. But for us, I mean, you can just open your messenger and call
Yeah.
someone, or like send a text or something. There are whole bunch of people there that are completely lonely, and they need this interaction, and we need to create space that allow these interactions to happen. Did you know that in the Netherlands there is an actual supermarket chain that allocated one register for people that actually want to chat a little bit more with the cashier?
I heard about this and I love
Like,
it.
it's so simple, but like we need more of that. We
Yeah.
need cities that allow people to live.
Yeah. And it doesn't cost more to do that. Do you know what I mean? Yes, they'll go through slower, but they'll be loyal customers. And it was like, as you were talking there, like going out for a walk equalizes everybody. If you're out walking with your toddler, with your buggy, with your partner, with your adult kids, with your workmates, or like say the elderly out and about walking. My neighbor is 83, I think now. She goes out for a walk twice a day, and she's unreal. Like, but and she sees everybody when she goes out. She might buy a carton of milk, just go into the shop. But like say that's the social getting out of her house bit that she does. But it equalizes everybody. If you were saying hello to somebody and all you do is say hello to him as you're passing by, my sister used to laugh at me because I'd say hello to everybody. And she's like, they could be a criminal. I'm like, yeah, but then they'll think, oh, she's nice. I won't kill her. That's my logic. Look him in the eyes.
I love that. I'm gonna take it with me.
But it does. It equalizes everybody on a human level, and we need to remember that that's what we are at the core of it all. Like we can do great things, and we can think we're awesome, and on paper or digitally, we can be brilliant on the internet. But when we go out there, we're just the neighbor or the lady down the street or the friend or the mother, and it's kind of wholesome. I like that. I like that a lot. Thank you so much, Dagmar. That's been fun. And I really do appreciate you taking the time out on your day today.
Thank you, Jennifer. It was lovely. And I hope more of this type of discussion will keep happening and more people will keep their eyes open, and that you're going to keep your eyes open also and
I
start
won't be
pointing
able
out
to.
all of this small mess that we're going to do better every time.
I won't be able to not do it now. Thank you.